The short answer to the title of my video is yes. The longer answer is yeah, but it's still worth adding to your Sonos setup. I'll explain this better after a very short intro. Hey, welcome to the channel if you're new, welcome back if you're a regular. So there are already a lot of early reviews out there for the Sonos Sub Mini that cover the things like frequency response, tech specs, and comparisons to the Sub Gen 3. So I'm not going too deep with this one, but I will share my opinion of the Sub Mini from the perspective of someone who lives in a tiny flat, as I'm sure there are loads of you out there who are worried about disturbing your neighbors too. So our living room is about 400 by 410 centimeters and we're connected to neighbors on 3 sides. I started on a slippery Sonos slope with the Beam 2 because I was tired of wrangling with the volume controls on my TV. Oh nice, documentary about turtles. Can't really hear the narrator though.
Bae, what are you doing?
I swear on my mum's life. If you've ever had to turn the volume down because of loud explosions and then up again for speech, then you know what I'm talking about. The Beam 2 did a lot to improve on volume and clarity, but to my ears, the sound was a bit crowded and the simulated surround wasn't quite surroundy enough. So I added 2 1SLs to my setup with these excellent stands. Check out my review for those up here. I honestly think they're the best ones available. Anyway, when I added the ones to my setup, I was surprised at how boomy everything became. But of course, I was eagerly awaiting the Sub Mini anyway, because even though the bass in my setup was more than adequate, I was hoping for that super low hum that you can only get from a subwoofer. I wanted to feel it in my chest. But I didn't want to fork out more than £600 for the Sonos Sub Gen 3, because that would have cost more than my Beam 2 and my surround speakers combined. So thanks to the wireless speaker gods, all the rumours about the Sub Mini were true. But was it worth the wait? And is it worth the asking price of £429, especially for someone who lives in a small space? I have a sound test for you now, so put on your headphones to hear this properly. 3, 2, 1, go. If you didn't hear that much of a difference on that track, I completely share your sentiment. When listening to music, I have a hard time pinpointing the differences. And that's strange because the theory is that a sealed sub, like the Sub Mini, is supposed to be better for music. Maybe I chose the wrong tracks to listen to, or I'm not listening to the music at a high enough volume to get the real benefits. But even though it's not perceptible to my ears, it doesn't mean that the quality is not there. Let me know in the comments how you feel about listening to music with your Sub Mini. What my ears can detect is a difference and improvement in movies, TV and games consoles. Everything from soundtracks to ambience and effects is fuller and deeper, but not in a harsh way. I can't show you a sound test for entertainment because I don't want to get a copyright strike, but I try my best to describe it in words. So for my comparison, I replayed a sequence over and over in Star Wars: A Force Awakens. And there's a scene where Rey and Finn steal a ship and fumble their way out of trouble. To my ears, the sound on this part was a bit crunchy and harsh sounding with the sub off. But when I turned the sub on, the impact of the crashing was still there, but it felt smoother and more level. So it didn't feel like the sound was all getting squeezed out of a small funnel. Instead, it felt like I was being dipped into a pool of sound. I'm sorry if that analogy is all over the place, but what I'm trying to say is that the Sub Mini is giving me what I was hoping for, and that is a deep bass without the harshness that makes me flinch. I tried the same sequence with night sound on, volume at 15, and all of my EQ settings and everything else at 0. I could still feel the difference of the Sub Mini. There's a part in the action where Ray says, "I'm going low," and it's followed by a smooth drop that I could only hear with the sub turned on. So it's possible to get the benefits of the Sub Mini even at lower volumes, and the force cancelling drivers mean that you get a deep velvety bass without rattling, and that's super important if you want to cause as little disturbance as possible.
Video, hold on! I'm going low! Video, hold on! I'm going low! Video, hold on! I'm going low!
I found that anything between 15 and 20 on the master volume dial was more than enough to get the full experience, especially if the sound source is Dolby Atmos on Disney+. For gaming on a Series X, 13 seemed like plenty. And don't forget that with the EQ on the Sonos app, there's an extra layer of control over your bass when you add the Sub Mini to your setup. Just a quick note, as you might have heard of this already, but when you add surrounds and a subwoofer to your Sonos soundbar, some of the heavy lifting is handed over to the additional speakers. So this goes back to my funnel analogy. Instead of having all of the frequencies coming out of your soundbar, the additional speakers add some clarity and space to the tuning. That's the all-important sound part done, but before I get to my conclusion, there are a few other things I want to quickly mention. It's definitely bigger than I thought it would be. The height is fine, but it's quite a chunky boy. So for most people, the only decision that you get to make is where to place it. As a tiny flat dweller, I just placed it near the TV, and I didn't do this sub-crawl thing. Not to be mistaken with a pub crawl, although you do kind of end up on the floor looking like a twat doing either of them. The sub-crawl is a process where you put the subwoofer in your usual listening spot and then crawl around on the floor and listen out for where it sounds best. Then you simply switch places with the subwoofer. I'm just always going to choose the most convenient spot anyway, as I don't have many options, and to me it sounds great where it is. If you're considering the Sub Gen 2 or Sub Gen 3, you get to choose whether it sits parallel or perpendicular to the wall, and even laying flat underneath your furniture. The Sub Mini sits the same wherever you place it, so just because it looks smaller doesn't mean that it's more convenient. This subwoofer is so clean looking. If you're a fan of Sonos' design language, then you'll probably love how the Sub Mini looks as well. One of my favourite things about the Sub Gen 3 is the opening in the middle that reveals the two drivers facing each other. And I'm so glad we get a similar design here with the Sub Mini. Just like the Beam 2 and the Sonos ones, this is very pleasant to look at. It's about half the price of a Sub Gen 3, but it doesn't seem like they skimped on anything. It's built solidly, it's well machined, and it's hefty at 7 kilograms. It can have a little creaking if you hold it on the sides, so you should hold it by the base or by the opening if you have to. For the most part, it feels exactly how a £400 subwoofer should feel like. As usual, Sonos has integrated this product into the app very well. Installing it is just about plugging it in, waiting for the update, and tapping Add Sub. There are options to adjust EQ levels, and my favorite feature is the toggle to turn on and off the sub easily without unpairing it completely. This is handy for evenings when you want to be extra considerate to your neighbors. Small rant here for Sonos if you ever see this. If at all possible, it would be great if we could deactivate the speakers on a soundbar and only use the subwoofer and the surrounds as a 2.1 setup. So in the beginning of this video, I said I would explain my stance on the Sonos Sub Mini for a small flat in further detail. In my opinion, if you live in a small flat, you are going to feel anxiety about how your neighbors are feeling. But at the same time, it mellows out the bass so that it sounds less aggressive, but still enjoyable at lower volumes. If you like your bass and you're going to have it anyway, it might as well be a pleasant one. And if night sound is your default most of the time, you'll be happy to know that the Sub Mini makes enough difference there for you to enjoy too. Is it worth the asking price of £429? Well, if the idea of spending a big chunk of money on something that you will rarely get to use to its full potential sounds wrong to you, especially during these difficult times, hello cost of living crisis, then I don't think you should jump at this right away. Maybe give it a go next year during a price drop. If you only have the Ray or Beam 2 right now, I recommend adding the surrounds first, because those will give you enough bass for a small room and they will enhance your experience in a more impactful way. If you feel like you have an appetite for deeper bass after that, and you don't mind turning your Sub Mini off at night or reining it in on a regular basis, then you won't regret the Sub Mini at all. Overall, the Sub Mini delivers on my personal checklist. It's sleek, it's sexy, sounds great with night mode, and adds more dimensions to my smaller setup without being overkill. Thanks for joining me for today's video. I'd like to hear what you think about the Sub Mini, so feel free to fire off in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe. I'm going to be delving into the crazy world of mechanical keyboards in a future video, and don't worry, I'm a noob, so I'll be taking you along for the journey step by step. Take care, stay safe, see you soon.